The knock came just as the sun was dropping behind the maple trees, painting the quiet street in soft orange light. It was the kind of knock that didn't belong to trouble or salesmen. It was careful, almost unsure, like the person on the other side wasn't certain they should be there at all. Inside the house, Ethan Miller froze, his hand still wrapped around a cold coffee mug he had forgotten to drink. He hadn't had visitors in months. Ethan lived alone in a modest house in a peaceful Oregon neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to change. The lawns were trimmed, the flags waved gently, and people waved politely, but rarely stopped. His life had slowly settled into the same pattern: wake up, work, come home, eat something simple, sit in silence, sleep. It wasn't a bad life, but it felt empty in ways he didn't like to admit. The knock came again. Ethan set the mug down and walked to the door, his steps slow, his thoughts racing. When he opened it, he found Emily Parker standing there with a small paper bag in her hands and a polite, nervous smile on her face. She lived next door. I'd shared driveways, weather complaints, and casual greetings for years, but nothing more. "Hi, Ethan," she said. "I hope this isn't a bad time." Her voice was warm, familiar, and suddenly the house didn't feel quite as quiet. "No, it's fine," he replied, surprised at how relieved he felt. "What's up?" "I baked banana bread," she said, lifting the bag slightly. "Way too much. I thought I'd share before I eat it all myself." Ethan smiled without thinking. It felt natural, easy. He stepped aside and invited her in. The house smelled faintly of old wood and cleaning spray. It was neat, but lifeless, like a place meant to be passed through, not lived in. Emily noticed right away. She had expected signs of family, photos on walls, noise. Instead, there was space. Too much space. They sat at the kitchen table. The banana bread stayed untouched as conversation began slowly, then picked up speed. They talked about work, about how strange the weather had been, about how the neighborhood used to feel livelier years ago. The words flowed easily, as if they had been waiting for this chance. Ethan listened more than he spoke. Emily had a calm way of talking, steady and thoughtful. She laughed softly at her own jokes and didn't rush her words. Ethan found himself leaning forward, interested, engaged in a way he hadn't been in a long time. Emily noticed it too. She had moved into the neighborhood after her divorce, hoping for a quiet place to reset her life. She hadn't expected to feel seen again so soon. Ethan wasn't flashy or dramatic, was gentle, thoughtful, and clearly carrying something heavy inside him. That kind of sadness felt familiar to her. As the minutes passed, the conversation turned more personal without either of them meaning it to. "I used to think silence meant peace," Emily said, her fingers resting on the edge of the table. "Now I know it can also mean loneliness." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, silence can be loud." He didn't explain more, but he didn't have to. Emily understood. Her own marriage hadn't ended with shouting or betrayal. It had ended with quiet dinners, missed conversations, and a slow realization that they were no longer sharing the same life. A pause settled between them, not awkward, just full. Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary. Something passed. Between them, recognition, maybe, understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. Emily stood up, sensing the moment had reached its natural end. "I should head back," she said. "I didn't mean to keep you." "I'm glad you came," Ethan replied honestly. At the door, she hesitated, her hand resting on the handle. "If you ever want company," she said, her voice softer now, "I'm next door." When she left, the house felt different, still quiet but not empty. Ethan stood there longer than he meant to, staring at the closed door, his heart beating faster than usual. He told himself it was just a friendly visit, nothing more. But something had shifted. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself thinking about that evening more than he expected. It's the way Emily listened, the calm inner voice, the warmth she brought into the room. He hadn't felt that kind of ease with someone in years. Emily felt it too. Oh, she replayed the visit while folding laundry, while driving to work, while lying awake at night. She reminded herself that kindness didn't always mean something deeper. Still, she couldn't ignore how alive she felt during that short visit. They began running into each other more often. A shared morning walk turned into a conversation that lasted 3 blocks. A quick wave became coffee on the porch. None of it felt planned, yet none of it felt accidental either. They talked about books, old dreams, mistakes they had made, and lessons they had learned too late. Ethan spoke about his wife, Claire, carefully. She had moved away for work years earlier. What started as distance became separation, then a quiet understanding that their marriage was holding on by habit, not love. They still spoke sometimes, but the connection was thin. Emily listened without judgment. She spoke about her own divorce, about how starting over in her 40s felt scary but necessary. She didn't paint herself as a victim. She spoke with honesty, strength, and a hint of sadness she had learned to live with. As the days passed, the space between them felt smaller. The conversations grew longer. The pauses grew deeper. There was no rush, no crossing of lines. Just 2 people standing at the edge of something new, unsure whether to step forward. One evening, as the sky darkened and porch lights flickered on across the street, Emily invited Ethan over for dinner. It was casual, she said, nothing special. But it felt special. Her house was warmer, filled with soft music and the smell of soup simmering on the stove. Ethan noticed the details, the photos on the wall, the plants by the window, the signs of life. He felt comfortable there, welcome. They sat at the table, laughing quietly, sharing stories. The connection felt natural, unforced. For a moment, Ethan forgot about the weight he had been carrying for years. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and felt his chest tighten. Claire. The name brought everything rushing back. Emily noticed the change in his expression immediately. She didn't ask, but she knew. Ethan hesitated, then answered. The call was short. Claire was coming back to town for a few weeks. She wanted to talk. She said it mattered. When the call ended, the room felt different. Emily didn't smile this time. She looked at Ethan with understanding, but also with a quiet disappointment she didn't try to hide. You should take that seriously, she said gently. I know, Ethan replied. Neither of them said more. They didn't need to. The dinner ended early. There was no argument, no drama. Just the quiet realization that timing could complicate even the most genuine connection. As Ethan walked home, the street felt longer than usual. He looked back once and saw Emily standing in her doorway, watching him go. She raised her hand in a small wave, then closed the door. Inside his house, the silence returned. But this time, it hurt more than before. And somewhere between that knock on the door and that unanswered feeling in his chest, Ethan realized that what had started as a simple, friendly visit had already begun to change everything even before either of them fully understood it. The first thing Ethan noticed the next morning was how quiet the street felt again. It's the same houses, the same parked cars, the same early sunlight, but something inside him had shifted overnight. What once felt calm now felt unfinished, like a song that stopped in the middle of the chorus. Emily didn't wave when she left for work. That small detail stayed with Ethan all day. At the office, numbers blurred on his screen. Meetings passed without meaning. His mind kept returning to the way Emily had looked the night before, kind, understanding, but clearly hurt. He hadn't planned for things to move so quickly, yet he hadn't planned for them to matter this much either. Emily, meanwhile, drove, to work with her hands tight on the steering wheel. She told herself to focus on the road, on the traffic, on the radio playing low in the background. Still, her thoughts refused to slow down. She replayed Ethan's expression when his phone lit up. The name she hadn't seen, but somehow already knew. Claire Emily wasn't angry. She was realistic. Life didn't pause just because feelings showed up uninvited. Still, knowing that didn't make it easier. She had promised herself she wouldn't step into unfinished stories again. Not after the pain it took to close her last chapter. For the next few days, the rhythm between them changed. They still saw each other, still exchanged polite smiles, but the warmth had cooled. Conversations stayed short. Eye contact broke too soon. What once felt easy now felt careful. Ethan waited. He waited for a message from Emily that never came. He waited for the right time to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. And all the while, he waited for Claire. When she finally arrived, the reunion was quieter than either of them expected. There were no dramatic embraces or tears. Just two people standing in a familiar driveway, aware of how much time had passed. Claire looked older, but steadier. Life had shaped her in new ways. They sat inside the house that once belonged to both of them, now feeling like neutral ground. The walls listened as they spoke honestly for the first time in years. They talked about the distance, the missed chances, the way love slowly turned into routine and then into silence. Claire admitted she hadn't known how to come back. Ethan admitted he hadn't known how to ask her to stay. The conversations stretched across days. Some moments felt warm, filled with shared history and laughter. Other moments felt heavy, reminding them why things had fallen apart in the first place. Ethan wanted clarity, but clarity refused to arrive neatly. In the middle of it all, he kept thinking about Emily. One evening, after another long talk with Claire, Ethan stepped outside for air. The neighborhood lights were on, and the air carried the smell of rain. Across the street, Emily sat alone on her porch, wrapped in a light sweater, staring into the distance. Ethan hesitated, then walked over. She looked up, surprised but calm. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied. "Mind if I sit?" She nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable, just honest. "She's here," Emily said softly. "Yes," Ethan answered. Emily nodded again. I figured neither of them rushed the moment. They had both learned that rushing only led to regret. "I don't want to make things complicated for you," Emily said. "But I also don't want to pretend this doesn't matter." Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized how rare it was to be understood without explanation. "It matters to me," he said, "more than I expected." Emily smiled. Gently. That's the hard part. Over the next week, Ethan faced truths he had avoided for years. Claire wanted to try again, but not out of passion, out of comfort and history. Ethan cared for her deeply, but something inside him felt different now. He wasn't the same man who had watched her leave years ago. One night, after a long walk and an even longer silence, Ethan finally spoke the truth aloud. "I don't think we're moving toward the same future anymore." Claire listened carefully. Then she nodded. There was sadness in her eyes, but also relief. "I think I knew that," she said. "I just needed to hear it." They parted. With respect, with closure, with gratitude for what they once were. Days passed. Emily noticed when Claire's car disappeared. She noticed when Ethan's light stayed on later than usual. She didn't rush over. She didn't assume anything. She waited because she knew waiting didn't always mean losing. One Sunday evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, there was a knock at Emily's door. This time, it was Ethan. He stood there holding a loaf of banana bread, looking both nervous and hopeful. "I figured it was my turn," he said. Emily laughed, surprised and warm. "Come in." They sat at the same table where weeks earlier everything had begun. The conversation flowed easily again, but this time it carried a deeper understanding. They spoke openly about fear, timing, and how life rarely follows clean lines. "I didn't want to choose you as an escape," Ethan said. "I wanted to. Choose you clearly." Emily met his eyes. "That's all I ever wanted." They didn't rush into promises. They didn't pretend everything was perfect. They simply allowed the moment to exist. Outside, the neighborhood remained quiet, unaware of the quiet courage unfolding behind closed doors. Sometimes the most shocking turns in life aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes they arrive softly, asking for patience, honesty, and the bravery to begin again. And for Ethan and Emily, that was more than enough.